Okay, let's start today. Page Zion number base 87b. We'll start from the words bein nega lenega, which is 5 and about 12 lines from the bottom. Okay, we thank Hashem that we're able to learn Torah every day. For learning Hashem the base in English. And learning for Shlema for Naftali ben Menucha Bela, for anyone else that needs for Shlema, for Eretz Yisrael, for the hostages. Okay, so yeah, what we're talking about over here, Zakin Mamre, an elder that rebels against the High Court. He refuses to accept the High Court's opinion. Well, we had a brisa that goes through all the verses, that goes to the entire verse, each word of the verse, and explains what it's referring to. Then we had another brisa that has a machlekes between Reb Meir and Rabbi Yehuda and Reb Shimon about what severity of law is he disagreeing with the Sanhedrin, with the rest of the best. Well, Reb Meir's opinion was that he's disagreeing about something that's Zadainai Kares and Shigagase Chafas. That it starts off as if it's done intentionally, it's Kares, which is a severe punishment, and unintentionally is a Chafas. So now we have to go back to the Brisa, go through each of the cases, and explain why that case is a Kares case. One of the things the Brisa says, based on the pasuk, it says bein nega lenega. If it's between a spot of leprosy, knows the argument or the question that was brought to them, to the Sanhedrin, was about a spot of leprosy. And the Brisa explains, bein negi adam, negi batim, negi begadim. Whether it's a leprosy because of, it's a spot of leprosy referring to on the person's body, on the person's house, or on the person's clothes. Now the Gemara is going to explain, so what is the machlekes? What is the question that was asked to the Sanhedrin that the Zaken Mamre refuses to accept? He said maybe what it is the following. Maybe the spot of leprosy is really the machlekes between Rabbi Shua and the Rabbanan, the Tananas was taught in the Mishnah. Im Baheres Kadam L'Seir Lavan. If the Baheres, spot of leprosy, comes before the white hair that grows in it. In other words, there's a hair that grows in the leprosy, 2 hairs actually, that make it considered tummy. So if the spot came first and the white hairs came later, then it's tummy. Im say 11 kaidal and beharis. If the white hairs came first and then the spot grew around it, then that's tahar. That's not a sign of impurity. Safik, if you're not sure which one was first, so then the Chachamim say tummy. Rabbi Shua Keha. Rabbi Shua uses the word keha, which means dim. My keha, what is dim? What are you referring to? Amarava kehatar, talking about that when something dims, it becomes tar, right? If it dims, if the brightness of the spot dims, so then it becomes tar. So this is a case of tar. Well, what does this have to do with a prohibition of kares? That the Zakin Mamre is now going to get a death penalty here based on this. So it says like this: if, according to the Rabbanan, he enters into the temple, so he's going to be tamei, and that's a prohibition of kares. According to Rabbi Yeshua, he's going to be tar. If he enters in the temple, there's no prohibition. So based on the Zakin Mamre, if he's going to go like Rabbi Yeshua, and the Sanhedrin goes like the Chachamim, then that's a case of kares. Okay. Now we're up to Negi Batim, spot on the house. Spot of leprosy. They put to the Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon Rabbanan. This is a machlekes between Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon and Rabbanan. The Tanan started in the Mishnah. Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon Aimer. Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon says, Rabbi Elazar Bar Shimon says that a spot on a house would only make the house tamei if it's on the corner. Because it has to be touching two walls, it has to be on two walls, and it has to be considered one spot. And the only way they can get two walls, one spot, is if it's on the corner, spread out. Length is 2 grisen. Gris is a split peak, or split bean. And the width is 1 gris. And the Chachamim say, no, it's not. It doesn't need to be like that. Now, my time of the Rabbi Elazar Bar Shimon, what's the reason why Rabbi Elazar Bar Shimon holds this? Because if you look at the verses, it says Ksiv Kir, Ksiv Kirais. It says Mareim Shafal Minakir, that the appearance is deeper than the wall. And it says, behold, the spot is in the walls of the house. So it says, what do you mean the walls? You just said it's on the wall. It says, no, it has to be Ezu Kir Shuki Kirs. Which wall is like walls? It must be on the corner. Because that one wall, that one spot which is on the wall is really on both walls. Okay. And so how does this have to do with kares? Because if someone went into that house and he becomes tamei, according to the Chachamim, even if the spot wasn't on both walls, still tamei. Then if he enters into the temple, then that's a prohibition of kares. To Rabbi Elazar Bar Shimon, he's going to be pater. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And let's do this. Let's see. We're going to the next page now, right? Niki begadim. When it comes to the spot on the clothing, spot of leprosy. This is another machlekes. Tanya was starting a brayse. Rabbi Yonasan ben Avtolmas Aimer. The opinion of Rabbi Yonasan Matumas is minayin on top of peches. How do we know? The priest of begadim shitayra. Here we're talking about. How do we know that if a spot of leprosy spreads to the entire, if it spreads to the entire person, there's no healthy skin left, then the person becomes tar, right? It's only if it spreads entirely, then he becomes tar. Covers his entire body without any spot, empty of it. Yeah, it's similar. What happens if clothing does it work like that as well? So Rabbi Yonasan says, how do you know that it works the same? So it says Nemer karachas v'gamachas b'adam, Nemer karachas v'gamachas b'begadim. It uses the same term of a baldness on clothing, and it uses that same term by the person. It uses by clothing. Malal and parach b'kulitar, just like by the person, if it spreads entirely is tar. Afkan parach b'kulitar. Also by the clothing, if it spreads entirely, it's going to be tar. It's going to be pure. Now, what does it have to do with kares? Because if a person touches this clothing and he enters into the base of Mikdash, then there's going to be a machlekes. According to the Rabbanan, he's going to be chayiv because it's really tamei. According to Rabbi Yonasan ben Avtolmas, it's going to be pater from kares because he considers it tar because it's spread across the whole clothing. Okay. Now, going to the next word from the pasuk, which the Brisa will elaborate on. It says, pasuk says, Divrei Rives. If it's words of conflict in your gates, so the word Divrei, the Brisa elaborated on, it says, Elo ha'erechen b'charamim v'akteshes. It's talking about laws that are created by words, which is if someone pledges the value of a person based on his age, the temple, it's called erechen, or charamim. If someone pledges things to the kayanim or to the temple, it's called the cherim. And hekdeshes is if someone consecrates an item. So this is all created by words. Well, Now it says like this. Erichin, when it comes to the pledge of a person's value based on his age to the temple, so what's the conflict between the Zakin Mamri and the Sanhedrin? It says, "Beplukta the Rameya v'Rabbanan." It's talking about a machlekes Rameya and the Rabbanan. The Tanan was taught in the Mishnah. Marach bachas men chodesh. Someone pledges the value of a child that's under a month old. The list of values starts from 1 month. Here he pledges under a month. So what does he mean? Reb Meir says, well, we don't have a set value for this, but we can give the value based on what he would be worth if he was sold as a slave. So he does have monetary value, although we're not giving the value based on the age, these age brackets, how much a person has to pay. But so if he doesn't fit into those age brackets, so then he just has to give a monetary value. He said nothing. The Meir's view is that a person would never say anything in vain. So therefore, what he meant to do was to give the person's value sold as a slave, which is different than erechin, we call it damav, his monetary value based on what it would be worth. Now, what happens is like this. The Zaken Mamre is passing like either Reb Meir or the Chachamim, and the Sanhedrin is passing like either Reb Meir or the Chachamim. They're arguing. Now, what about that money? Who owns that money? So it's machlekes. According to Reb Meir, there's money that belongs to the temple. According to the Chachamim, the money does not belong to the temple. Now, if someone takes that money, and he marries a woman, so then the woman won't be married according to Reb Meir. According to the Chacham, she will be, because according to the Chacham, it's not hekdesh.
So this is like money that he had in his pocket and he pledged it, and he used it for something else.
He had money. He before you talk about the money in his pocket, first he made a pledge. Now, is that pledge valid? So, because he made a pledge of erechin for the age that's not listed in the Torah, so does he have to give a different type of pledge, or do we just say no? What he said is invalid. So Reb Meir says he has to give a different type of pledge. Some say what he said was invalid. Now the money that's being taken from him, let's say they take it from him because they pass him like Reb Meir or something. So now whose money really is it? So if someone uses that money, did he is the woman married? To marry a woman, is this woman married? Yeah. Another example here is that if someone makes personal use of money that's consecrated, so he has to bring a sacrifice. It's called the Asham Me'ilas. Now that carbon, with an extra 50, yes. That carbon, if a person eats that carbon when he's tamei, so is this really? Did he really need to do this? Did he really need to bring the carbon? Because there was a machlekes if that money was really consecrated. So ultimately, it's going to play out into a halacha of kares. Why? Because of the sacrifice. Because he used it, and then the sacrifice he ate betuma. It's going to be a prohibition of kares.
I remember that in that example, that one person uses like money that doesn't belong to him.
So it's saying in Mekadeshes, we should use something stolen. It's not a good man. Right?
Nothing. It's not like the real owner of the money is the one.
No. Yeah. Okay. What's the next case? Next case is charamin. Charamin is when someone consecrates an item. It's machlekes. He says, "But this is cherem. if it goes to the Kohanim or if it goes to the Beis Hamikdash. Well, the plug to the Rabbi ben Meseir, Rabban the Tanan, Rabbi ben Meseir, Rabbi ben Meseir says, "Stam charam lebedek habayis." It goes to the Beis Hamikdash. Shneim kol chayim kodesh kedash mul Hashem. V'chamem stam charamem l'kainim. Shneim k'stei chayim l'kain tiach v'zasik. There's machlekes here based on the verses. What is when someone says the word chayim, doesn't mean that he's giving it to the temple. It doesn't mean that he's giving it to the priest. So, Imkain, the Gemara says, "Matam leimer kodesh kedash mul Hashem." Shechal al kodesh kedashim al kodeshim kalim. That you can make, even though it belongs to he can consecrate his own portions of kachi of karbanos, kachi kachim and kachim kalim, and he has to give that value to the Beis Hamikdash. Well, now what would happen is like this: if it belongs to the bedek habayis, so then there's a problem of meila. If he uses it, like we said, if he uses it, he has personal use from this money, then he has to bring a sacrifice. And if he eats that sacrifice, b'tumah, then it's a chi of kares. On the other hand, maybe he doesn't have to bring the sacrifice, and then if he eats it, then there's no problem. It wasn't the sacrifice. So then it turns out that there's kares based on this machlekes. So we're talking about that the Zaken Mamre held one way, the Sanhedrin held the other way, and it's relevant to Issa kares. Ekdeshus, what about if he just consecrates an item? Looked at Rabbi ben Yaakov and Rabbanan. So this would be a machlekes Rabbi ben Yaakov and Rabbanan. The Tanya was studying in Brayso. Rabbi ben Yaakov and Rafilut Sinai Shel Hekdesh Sichas Arben En Lefteisa. How do you redeem things from Hekdesh? So in the beginning of the Masechta, I think we had this machlekes that you need 10 people to be there to evaluate the item when you're redeeming it. So according to Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, even if it's a small fork that was consecrated, you want to redeem it, you need 10 people there. If you didn't have the 10 people there, then you didn't redeem it. And so it's still considered hekdesh. It's still considered hekdesh. You think it's redeemed, and you start using it. So that's meila. And that's meila. You have to bring a carbon. Bring a carbon. If you eat the carbon b'tumas aguf, then it's going to be kares.
Do we know how they came up with it? I'm guessing that some people would probably have to take it.
We had this before on Daf Yomi. Yeah. Well, the Mishnah said that you only need 3 people. Brayso says you need 10 people. It says 10 times the word kayanim in the parsha. In that section, it says 10 times the word kayanim. Then it must mean that you need 10 kayanim to redeem it.
There's 10 and 3, like the number.
I mean, how do they decide after that? I'm not sure. Whatever conclusion they come to. Yeah. Probably by 3 people, you go by the majority. So by 10 people, you go by the majority as well. Yeah, I think the Gemara actually asked that.
But then 10 could be even.
I think the Gemara asked that if you need all 10 or not. I'm not sure. Okay. Revise. Now we speak about the conflicts. What are the conflicts? We said Zuashka Saita, Rifas Egla, Rifas Egla, Taras Mitzayr. Conflicts are referring to what we learned yesterday is the Saita, making the Saita drink, the breaking the neck of the young calf if someone was murdered between cities, and the purification of the mitzvah. Well, hashkas saita. What we spoke about the drinking, the saita. What is that referring to? There's a chorus. It says, right when you start Masech the Saita, you have this machlekes. The Tanan was said in the Mishnah, Makane le'ishtay. Someone warns his wife not to be secluded with another man. How many witnesses do you need to that warning? Rabbi Lezer and Makane al pishnayim. Rabbi Lezer says you need 2 witnesses to the warning. But when he sees her secluded, that he can even do on his own, or even 1 witness. Rabbi Yeshua or Makane al pishnayim, mashkal pishnayim, that you need 2 witnesses for both. Well, you need 2 witnesses for both. So now, let's say, you don't have 2 witnesses. Let's say you only have 1 witness. If that's the case, according to Rabbi Lezer, he has to divorce her, or she drinks the water. At least she refuses to drink. Then he divorces her, and she doesn't get a ksuba. He saw that she was secluded, but he doesn't have witnesses to that. It was just him. According to Rabbi Yeshua, she still gets a ksuba. So now what happens is, money of the ksuba, if it was taken by because she grabbed it or something, then that money would be considered hers according to Rabbi Lezer. According to Rabbi Yeshua, it's hers. According to Rabbi Lezer, it's not hers. Let's say actually we're saying she sold the ksuba to someone else, and the person takes it. So that money, is it really his? It's machlekes Rabbi Lezer. I'm sure if that person then goes and marries a woman, be a machlekes if the woman is married. So which means that there's an issur kares, a married woman, based on the machlekes about hashkas saita. So the Zaken Mamre held like Rabbi Lezer or like Rabbi Yeshua. The Sanhedrin held the other way. Based on that, it's going to come out an issur kares based on the money of the ksuba that someone else uses to marry a different woman. Okay, Arifa Segla, the breaking of the neck. Look to the Rabbi Lezer, Rabbi Akiva. That would be a machlekes Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Akiva, and explains like this: that how do they measure these 2 cities? They have to measure they're measuring to the place of the murder, right? Which city is closer? So this machlekes, the Tanan, it was started in the Mishnah. From where did they measure? Rabbi Lezer and Mitabure. They measure from the belly button to the nearest city. Rabbi Kiva and Mechekmer. Rabbi Kiva says no, they measure from the nostrils. Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov and Makim Shnasachal Mitzavar. Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov says no, measure from the neck. Okay, now they bring the Egla Rufa. One of the cities brings the Egla Rufa. Why? Because based on their measurements, this was the closest city. Now there's a machlekes if where to measure from. So it could be based on this one's measurement, based on the measurement that they were measuring from the nose, but really they're supposed to measure from his belly button. From his belly, it means that the other city may have been closer. Okay, now, this Egla Rufa that they used is Asr Ba'ana. Maybe it wasn't really an Egla Rufa because maybe the measurements are supposed to be the other way. So if someone takes this Egla Rufa and makes use from it, he marries a woman with the value of that he gets from this Egla Rufa. So it could be it's Asr Ba'ana, and then the woman isn't married. It could be it's not an Egla Rufa and it's Mutter Ba'ana, and the woman is married. So you see that the outcome of an Egla Rufa could be an issur kares as well. Now, Taras and Mitzayra, the purification of a Mitzayra, of a leper. Look to the Reb Shimon Rabbanan, this is the machlekes Reb Shimon and Rabbanan, the Tanan. It's in the Mishnah. Ein lai bayin yad, bayin regel, raising yamanis. Let's say the Mitzayra doesn't have the parts of the body that are needed for the purification. For example, he doesn't have a thumb, he doesn't have the big toe, he's missing his right ear. The Tanakama holds that he can never become purified. You put it on the spot where the right thumb is supposed to be. Put it on the spot where the big toe is supposed to be. You put it on the ear where the ear is supposed to be. Shimon says you put it on the left side. Okay, now, what would happen here is that is the person purified? It's machlekes. According to Rebbe Lezer, yes. According to Tanna Kama, no. So if there's a machlekes here between the Zaken Mamre and the Sanhedrin, this one elder and the Sanhedrin, it turns out that we're dealing with machlekes if someone's tummy. Now, if that person or someone that touches this person enters into the Beis Hamikdash, then there would be an Isakaris based on this machlekes. B'sharecha, in your gates. So leket shikhupeya. This is referring to the types of parts of the grain that get left for the poor. So leket, what is leket? Titanan. What's the machlekes about leket? It says shnei shibalim is leket. If the person, while he is harvesting, he drops one or two stalks, that's considered something that he needs to leave for the poor. Shleisha, but if he drops three, ain't a leket. He doesn't need to leave that. That he can already pick it up again. Shikha. Okay, so he takes it through all three. Shikha is the same thing. Shnei Aimrim, if he forgets bundles of wheat in the field. So that's if he forgets two, then that shikha, he has to leave it for the poor. Shleisha, if he gets three, that he's allowed to go back and take, ain't a shikha. Balkulam, and on all of these cases that we just said, the leket and the shikha, Bishamayim Shalishani Barbala Balabayas. Bishamay adds in one more. Bishamay says that three belong, even if he forgets three or he drops three, that belongs to the poor person. It's four that the owner can go back and take. So now we have machlekes between Bishamay and Bisil. So if this is the question that the Zaken Mamre had, and they end up in the Sanhedrin paskins one way, the Zaken Mamre refuses to accept the psak, and he goes the other way. We have a question: whose money this is? Question: whose money it is? That means that there's a question: if this money is used to marry a woman, was it really his money to spend? And is the woman married? Which means that there's a question over here of kares. Right. Probably means in the same cutting. Okay. Hey, the corner of the field, look, Rabbi Shmuel Rabbanan. In the machlekes between Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbanan, Tan mitzvahs pei lahafish min hakama. You're supposed to leave the payah from the standing grain. You let the poor person come and harvest that grain that's there. Lahafish min hakama. If you didn't designate it from this, you leave a corner of the field for the poor person to come to cut. If you didn't leave that corner, yafish min aimrim, you already cut everything. Okay, so then you just leave bundles for the poor. Lahafish min aimrim, if you didn't leave the bundles, yafish min akri, then you leave from the silo. Before the silo was smoothed off on the top. Once you smooth it off on the top, then meiser, then you just give meiser. You don't have to leave the payah. For nice and light. You give the meiser. Okay. Actually, what it means meiser, for nice and light, is that you first do the meiser, and then you take the pay off it.
Here on the note says, Rabbi Shmuel says that he always separate.
And so, Mishum Rabbi Shmuel Raf Mafresh Manisa. Rabbi Shmuel argues on this. He says that you have to even separate it even after it's turned into dough. You have to separate the payah. Okay, now, if that's the case, so the poor person comes and takes it after it's been ground already. According to Rabbi Shmuel, it belongs to him. According to the Rabbanan, it doesn't belong to him. Because according to the Rabbanan, he was exempt already once it was put into the silo, right? Or once it's ground, he's exempt. So that's the case. Now, if a person uses this money, if the poor person uses the money, marry a woman, question is if it was really his money. Machlaikas. So based on that machlaikas, there would be the karis, and that's how this is a case where the zaken mamre would be put to death. Okay, all this was explaining the brisa according to Reb Meir. Gimel Batidinim, it says in the Mishnah that there were 3 courthouses on the Temple Mount. One was on the gate of the Harabayas, one was on the gate of the Azara, and one was in the Lishkas Agasas. Amar Rav Kana. Kana now explains that what was the machlekes between the Zaken Mamre and the people of the Besdin. Let's say he says that this is a tradition that I received from my teachers. And they say, what? We received a different tradition from our teachers. That's not a Zaken Mamre. He says, this is what seems logical to me. And they say, this is what seems logical to us. It's not a Zaken Mamre, it's just on logic. But Kolshkin, for sure, if he says from tradition, and they say this is what seems logical to us, that he's not killed. He has to say, this is what appears logical to me. And they say, but our tradition is different. And he refuses to accept their tradition. Then he becomes a Zaken Mamre. He's using his logic over their tradition. Teda, I'll prove it to you. Kavya ben Mahalal was not put to death. He argued on the sages within the Lishkas Agazas regarding 4 things, and told his son when he was passing away, he said, you should know that you don't have to accept the things that I was fighting with the sages about, because I heard it from my teachers, who were the majority. And they heard it from their teachers, whoever that majority was. And so I held my ground because I heard it from my teachers, and they held their ground. However, you heard it from me, and you heard their teaching, and you heard what the elders had held. Because who's the majority? Is the elders. So you would have to follow what you heard from the majority, which is the Sanhedrin, not my teachers. That's what Akavi ben Malal told the son. Now, why didn't they kill Akavi ben Malal? Because he was arguing with him, because he didn't say that it was something that it was based on logic. He said what he heard from his teachers. So based on that, we don't kill the person that's we don't kill it's not considered a Zaken Mamre if it's based on his tradition. Everyone uses logic. The question is, if everyone else argues, you have to accept that the rest of the Sanhedrin argues. You have to say, maybe you're referring to something else. You're referring to time mitzvahs. Shimon holds that you follow what the logic of the mitzvah. Yeah, but that doesn't have to do with what people are arguing. Okay. Now it goes on. It says, Rabbi Lazar says, no, Rabbi Lazar says, even if he says, I have a tradition, and they say that, but we see this as logical, and they're arguing with him based on logic. Nerag, he's still killed. What's the reason? According to him, we don't want to have a machlekes. We don't want to have increased machlekes into Rabbi Lazar. So therefore, the person gets put to death, just because, even though he's following this tradition. Then Makavi ben Malala was following his tradition. Why didn't they put him to death? Because he didn't paskin practically. He was only giving a Daf Yomi share. Wasn't the halacha. He was just saying what his teacher said. Okay, now Tanan says, this is how I taught, and this is how my friends taught, and he's coming to the Sanhedrin to ask them who's correct. My love, when he's saying this is how I learned and this is how they learned, what does it mean? Maybe it means that this is how I heard from tradition, and they're saying this is how it's logical. It says it's the opposite. He's saying this is what it appears to me logical. The Sanhedrin, the rest of his Bezdin is saying what they heard from tradition. So now the Sanhedrin is saying that. Tashima, Damar Rabbi Yeshua says, said I heard from Zeira, who's from the people of Yerushalayim, says, Baal Shemachal al Kinuyev Kinuyev Machal. The husband warned his wife not to be secluded, and then she went and was secluded, and there's witnesses to that. And now they're gone on the way to the base of Migdash, but she makes him lemon meringue pie, and right, and he says, "Okay, I'm going to be Michael." So, or Ben Sayer Meir Shratzav Limchalei, or the Ben Sayer Meir, after he was warned, and he stole again, and he drank the wine, but he decides to clean up his room, and his parents are very happy with him. Michael, like that's my own commentary. So they say, we're not going to take you. We forgive it. Or Zaken Mamre, let's say this elder that's rebellious, Bezdin says he's such a nice guy. Right, normally he's a nice guy. Let's be Michael him. So that according to this Zeira from Anshe Yerushalayim, it's going to work. They could forgive it. He says then. No, the witnesses testified. Everything is going. It's based on who's pressing the case. Who's bringing
press charge?
He doesn't want to press charges.
Second, the state takes over. They don't care if the witnesses want to press charges or not. When they find a case, they don't care.
That's in criminal activity. Here we're saying that we're making it like it's not a criminal activity. It's based on who's pressing the charges. So
civil suit.
Civil suit. So when I came to the people of the south, my friends of the south, who's saying this is Rabbi Yeshua.
The civil suit is a couple.
Al Shnayim Haidali. Two of them they agreed, but Al Zakin Mamri Haidali Kadesh Liyav Machlekes B'Yisrael. But they didn't agree to the Zakin Mamre that they could forgive it. Now, if that's the case, then this is a support to Rebbe Lazar, not to the sages. It's a kasha on the sages. The sages said that if he says something that he heard from tradition, and the Sanhedrin saying something that's logical, he said that wasn't a Zakin Mamre. That's what the sages said. Rebbe Lazar said that it was a Zakin Mamre. Now his logic was because we don't want to have increased amount of conflict of differences of opinion. If that's the case, then this brisa supports Rabbi Yeshua. This brisa supports Rebbe Lazar. Kasha, it's a kasha on the Tanya. But in the brisa, Rabbi Yeshua says, originally they didn't have a lot of machlekes. Why? The Bezdin of 71 judges was sitting in the chamber of hewn stones, which is where they sat. And there are two other courts of 23. One of them was at the entrance to the Temple Mount. And one was on the entrance to the temple courtyard. There were 23 judges in many other cities, or in every city. If they had a question, people came to the Bezdin in their city. If they knew the answer from tradition, they said it. And they would go to a neighboring city. If the neighboring city knew the answer, they would say it. They would come up to the first one on the Temple Mount. If they knew the answer, they tell them. They would come to the one that's in the entrance to the courtyard. And he says, this is how I learned it, and this is how my friends learned it. This is how I learned it, this is how my friends learned it. if they heard who's correct. So Amalam, tell them who's correct. Them lav, they don't know. These and these. And now we have the answer. They're all going now to the Lishkas Agazis. Yesterday we weren't sure if they all go or if just now here it says Elu. These and these go to the Lishkas Agazis. Shem Yeshmin, and to the over there they sat Mitamit Shel Shachar Tamit Sheminamayim. They sat from the morning sacrifice to the afternoon sacrifice. Shabbos v'Yom Tov and Yeshim Bechel. Shabbos and Yom Tov, they sat outside the chamber because they needed either more room or because they didn't want it to look like they were doing judgments. Initial Ashayla B'fneim, they would ask them the question. Im Shamu, they knew the answer. They would take a vote. Rabbu Amatamim Tameil. The majority said that it's Tamei, then they would say Tamei Rabbu Matarim Tiru. And that's how they would, everything was decided. This is how said that we didn't have machlekes. Why didn't they have machlekes? Because they would resolve it. Yeah. When there was an increase in the students of Shammai and Hillel. That they did not serve the elders enough. In other words, they didn't learn it well enough. Rabba Machlekes B'Yisrael. That's when arguments started. It started to increase. Benasas Torah, Kirstei Torahs. The Torah became like two different traditions. And from there, from the Lishkas Agazis, they would write. They would send to all other places. Anyone that's wise and humble. And people are happy with him. In other words, he gets along with other people. Yehei Dayan Be'ir should become a judge in the city. So besides being a sage, he also has to be humble, and also people have to get along. He has to get along with people. If he becomes that judge in the city, Misham Ma'alam Mesel Harabayas, he can go to a higher, get promoted to the court on the Harabayas. Misham Lazar, Misham Lishkas Agazis. Then he works his way up to the higher court, to the one in Lishkas Agazis. Sholch Misam. They sent from Eretz Yisrael. Ezu ben Elam Abba, who is someone that's deserving of the world to come. Instead, Anvasan, someone that's humble. Shafal Beirach, also means humble. And Shayef, Ayel, Shayef, Benafik. Modest and humble. Okay. How do they translate Shayef? He bows when he enters. Bows when he enters, and he leaves bowing. Nafik as he leaves. He's always studying Torah. And he does not take credit for himself. The sages looked at Rab Ula Bar Abba. Said, "Oh, he's the guy. He's the one that this is referring to." Now we're saying that if he goes back into his city and he teaches differently than what the Sanhedrin said, so he is not put to death until he paskins that thing. Now, is the Gemara here, is the Brisa here asking a question, or is it saying an option? Is it saying two options of when he's going to be chayiv? Either the two options. Either he follows the ruling different than the Sanhedrin, or he tells others to follow the ruling different than the Sanhedrin.
Can I back up one step? With this
yeah.
There's a comment here in the art scroll by the Marash that's, if I'm reading it right, it's very interesting. He's saying the reason he's talking physically bound down, that if this guy has a lot of money, if I'm reading this right, that he should build a house that the doorway, when people go in and out, they should have to bow down a little bit and out. And I'm reading this, and it's like nowadays you see people who build two-story houses, they build very tall doors, very big doorways. It's very impressive going into the house. But this gives the
How many
impression.
stories do you have?
This gives
How many
this is
stories do you have?
Maharashtra. Even if it gives the impression, even if he has such a house, he should still build
Oh,
a lower
Uh-huh.
doorway.
interesting.
If I'm understanding you right.
Okay.
How many stories do you
It's a
have?
side of Maharashtra. Stories, I can tell you stories for a long
Two
time.
stories.
Okay, so Gemara now says like this: either he paskins, we said either he paskins or he tells others to paskin differently than the Sanhedrin in the Lishkas Hagas. Especially Mir Lachem Yasu Rasimi Kara Rasai. If he's telling others to do it, and they do it, right? So then Mi Kara Lav Barkatalu. He originally, before he came back, he was not deserving of the death penalty. But now he does get the death penalty because simply for making a ruling that goes against the Sanhedrin. But one second. Let's say we're saying that if he does, not that he tells others, but if he himself does what the Sanhedrin said not to do. So even if he never went to the Sanhedrin, he would get the death penalty. Why? Because the Avera that he did maybe incurred the death penalty. Right? The Gemara says, maybe the psak, if the psak was regarding forbidden fats or blood, that's not a death penalty. But now he does get the death penalty simply because the Sanhedrin said one way and he's doing differently. But if the psak was referring to something that's deserving of the death penalty anyway, so I don't really need this whole concept of he's best in passing one way, he's passing differently. He's chayiv because he violated the halacha. It's not because of a zakin mamri. He's chayiv because he did the avera. Gemara says mikara b'yasra. If for the avera to be chayiv misa, for that he needs to be warned. But hashta lay b'yasra. Now he doesn't need to be warned. That's what's happening now because he's zakin mamre. He's doing the avera that maybe has a chi of misa on it, but he wasn't warned. He wouldn't get the chi of misa. He's only getting it because he's a zakin mamre. Mesis lay b'yasra me'ekameh. What about the mesis? Someone that's if this discussion had to do with telling other people to worship Avodah Zarah. We know that thank you. That person doesn't need Hasra. So, what is this? What would the difference be between if he does the Aveir himself or if he's a Zakin Mamre? So, Yomer Taima, if he would be a regular Mesis, so then, if he gave a reason, Yomer Taima Mekablin Minay. If he said why he's innocent, we would accept it. But now, even if he says a reason, we don't accept it. Why? Because the Besdin said already what he's supposed to do, and he didn't listen. So therefore, here he would get the death penalty. We're just adding in. As a Zakin Mamre, he would get the death penalty, even though as a regular Mesis, he wouldn't get the death penalty. Let's leave it here.
Oh, we just started.
We're